Welcome to Travel Insights, Breaking Barriers, Building Connections. I'm Clara, and today we're starting an exciting journey together exploring how to connect with locals while traveling abroad.
And I'm Leo. I can't tell you how pumped I am about launching this podcast series. There's nothing more rewarding than making real connections with people around the world, even when you don't speak their language.
That's exactly what inspired us to create this series. We'll be diving into everything from language barriers to cultural nuances, providing practical strategies to help you connect meaningfully with local communities during your travels.
Absolutely. And what better way to kick things off than with today's episode, the language of travel, breaking the communication barrier. We're going to tackle that fear many travelers have about not speaking the local language.
Right, because let's face it, that anxiety is real. I remember my first solo trip to Japan. I stood outside a corner shop in Yokohama for about 15 minutes, working up the courage to go in because I knew I couldn't speak Japanese.
But you did go in eventually, right? That's what matters. Every incredible connection starts with that first step outside your comfort zone. And today we're giving our listeners the confidence to take that step.
I did, and it was both terrifying and thrilling. But before we dive into our first segment, let me give you a quick overview of what's coming up in our 6-episode series. We'll start today with the fundamentals of cross-language communication, then move into cultural communication styles, building deeper connections, navigating cultural sensitivities, handling challenging situations, and finally exploring how these skills transform not just your travels, but your life.
I can't wait for all of it. This is going to be such a fantastic journey. So let's get started with our first segment, Beyond Words. Communication is more than language.
So Leo, one of the biggest misconceptions travelers have is that they need to be fluent in the local language to have meaningful interactions. But communication is so much more than just verbal language, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say verbal language is only about 30% of how we communicate. The rest is tone, facial expressions, gestures, and body language. I once managed to negotiate an entire street food transaction in Vietnam using only smiles, pointing, and a thumbs up.
That's a great example. Humans have been communicating across language barriers since before recorded history. We have this innate ability to understand each other on a fundamental level.
Exactly. And you know what's beautiful? A genuine smile means the same thing pretty much everywhere in the world. Making eye contact, nodding appreciatively, these are universal aspects of human interaction that transcend language barriers.
I think that's really reassuring for people who are anxious about traveling to places where they don't speak the language. The Office of Travel and Tourism estimated that in 2013, over 29 million Americans traveled overseas, mostly to countries where English wasn't the first language.
And I bet every single one of them found ways to communicate. Because when you think about it, perfect language skills aren't necessary for meaningful connections. What matters is the effort and the willingness to try.
Absolutely. And research backs this up too. According to a Priceline report, about 69% of locals actually enjoy tourists. They show enthusiasm about their culture. And one way to demonstrate that enthusiasm is by attempting to speak their language, even imperfectly.
See, your awkward attempts at pronunciation aren't embarrassing, they're endearing. It shows respect and genuine interest. And that opens so many doors.
Let's move on to our next segment, essential phrases that open doors. We've established that you don't need to be fluent, but learning a few key phrases can make a world of difference.
This is my favorite part. I always make flashcards with essential phrases before any trip. The power of simply saying hello or thank you in the local language is just incredible. People's faces light up.
It really does make a difference. What phrases do you think are absolutely essential for travelers to learn?
Great question. I always start with the basics. Hello, goodbye please, thank you, excuse me, and I'm sorry. Those 6 phrases alone can get you surprisingly far. Oh, and do you speak English? In the local language, that one's a game changer.
That last one is so important. When you ask, do you speak English in the person's own language, you're acknowledging that you're in their country and showing respect for their language. It's a small gesture that makes a big impression.
Absolutely. And don't forget practical phrases like, how much does this cost? That one saved me from dramatically overpaying for coconuts in Thailand, though the vendor seemed a bit disappointed when I understood his actual price.
There's also value in learning a few safety-related terms. Words like help, emergency, and police can be crucial in difficult situations. It's better to have them and never need them than the other way around.
Great point. And honestly, focusing on just 100 of the most common words in a language is far more useful than trying to memorize 1,000 random vocabulary words. Quality over quantity.
Exactly. And if you're wondering how to prioritize which phrases to learn before your trip, think about your specific needs and interests. If you're a foodie, learn food-related terms. If you're an architecture buff, learn words related to buildings and history.
That's such a smart approach. Personalize your language learning based on the experiences you want to have. It makes the learning more meaningful and practical. I learned all the surfing terminology I could before my trip to Portugal, and it led to some amazing conversations with local surfers.
Now let's talk about technology as your translation ally. We live in an incredible time where technology can help bridge language gaps in ways that weren't possible even a decade ago.
It's absolutely mind-blowing what we can do now. Translation apps have saved me countless times. I remember being in a tiny town in rural Japan, trying to find a specific type of ramen, and Google Translate turned me into a communications superhero.
There's definitely something magical about watching someone read your phone and then their face lighting up with understanding. But I've noticed that, according to research, while over 60% of tourists use their phones to find restaurants and directions, only about 30% use translation tools. That's a missed opportunity.
Such a missed opportunity. And the technology keeps getting better. Some apps even let you point your camera at text for instant translation. I used that feature to decipher a menu in Budapest and discovered my new favorite dish that I would have never ordered otherwise.
What about areas with limited connectivity, though? That's often a challenge when traveling off the beaten path.
Great point. That's why I always download offline translation packs before my trips. Google Translate, Microsoft Translator, and many other apps offer offline capabilities now. It's literally like having a translator in your pocket, even in the most remote locations.
That's a crucial tip. And speaking of tips, when do you think it's appropriate to use technology versus other communication methods? Because I've found that sometimes pulling out your phone can feel impersonal.
I completely agree. I think of translation apps as a backup, not a first resort. I always try basic communication first, those essential phrases we talked about, along with body language and gestures. If that's not working, then I'll bring out the tech support. It shows I'm making an effort rather than just relying on technology to do the work for me.
Let's move on to overcoming language anxiety. This is something I think most travelers can relate to, that fear of making mistakes or sounding foolish when attempting to speak another language.
Oh, I've definitely been there. But here's the thing that changed everything for me. Realizing that locals genuinely appreciate your efforts, regardless of how many mistakes you make. When I was in Mexico City last year, my terrible Spanish actually became a source of laughter and connection with the locals.
That's such an important mindset shift. There's this account I read about a traveler in Japan who was initially paralyzed by shyness, but gradually built confidence through small daily interactions like buying snacks at a corner shop. Each small success built their confidence.
That's exactly how it works. Language learning is like building muscle. You have to start small and work your way up. I love the idea of using everyday transactions as practice grounds. Low-stakes interactions are perfect for building confidence.
What are some techniques you've used to build confidence when speaking a new language?
Great question. I always start by practicing out loud when I'm alone, in the shower, in my hotel room, anywhere I can get comfortable with how the words feel in my mouth. Then I try my phrases with service staff, like at hotels or restaurants, before working up to more complex conversations with locals I meet.
That's a smart progression. And how do you handle misunderstandings? Because they're inevitable, right?
Absolutely inevitable. And that's completely okay. I've found that a good sense of humor is your best tool. If someone doesn't understand me, I laugh, try again, or use gestures. Sometimes I'll ask them to speak slowly. Habla más despacio, por favor, was one of the most useful phrases I learned in Spanish. And remember, even native speakers misunderstand each other sometimes.
That's such an important perspective. Miscommunication happens in any language, even our own. The key is not to let it shut you down or make you retreat back into only speaking English.
Exactly. Each little linguistic stumble is actually a stepping stone to becoming more confident. I keep a mental list of my funniest knowledge mistakes because they make great stories later. Like when I tried to ask for a fork in France and apparently asked for something completely inappropriate instead. The waitress was in tears laughing, but it broke the ice in the most memorable way.
Our next segment is the art of pointing and pantomime. When words fail us, our bodies can do a lot of the talking.
This is where we embrace our inner mime artists. Body language and gestures are incredibly powerful communication tools. I once successfully explained a pharmacist in Thailand that I had a headache without using a single word in Thai. Just some creative pointing at my head and making pained expressions.
That's a perfect example. But we should also note that gestures can vary significantly across cultures, right? The same gesture might mean something completely different or even offensive in another country.
Absolutely. That's why it's good to research culture-specific gestures before your trip. For example, the thumbs-up gesture that's positive in many Western countries can actually be quite offensive in parts of the Middle East and West Africa. But don't worry too much. Most locals understand you're a foreigner and give you some grace.
Good point. What about combining simple words with body language? That seems like an effective approach.
It's super effective. I call it the toddler method, using basic vocabulary combined with expressive gestures, just like little kids do before they're fully verbal. Something as simple as saying bathroom while making a subtle washing hands motion can get your message across clearly.
I found that pointing to objects or miming actions works particularly well when shopping or ordering food. But it's good to be mindful of cultural norms around pointing directly at people, which can be considered rude in some cultures.
Great reminder. And you know what I've noticed? The more enthusiastic and good-humored you are about your pantomime efforts, the more people want to help you. I once acted out an entire epic saga trying to find superglue in rural Portugal, and by the end, I had a small crowd of locals all invested in helping me solve my broken sandal crisis.
Let's talk about our final segment, visual communication tools. Sometimes having some prepared visual aids can make communication much easier.
This is where a bit of preparation goes such a long way. I'm a huge fan of using maps, pictures, and drawings to communicate. Before smartphones, I used to carry a small notebook where I'd draw things I needed to find. Now I just use my phone's photo gallery.
That's really smart. And for people with specific needs, like dietary restrictions or medical conditions, pre-made translation cards can be literal lifesavers.
Absolutely. I have a friend with a severe nut allergy who travels with allergy translation cards in multiple languages. They explain her condition and what she needs in an emergency. For something that serious, you don't want to rely on your beginner language skills or mime abilities.
Speaking of preparation, some travelers create a personalized visual communication notebook before their trip. Have you ever tried that approach?
I have. On my first backpacking trip through Southeast Asia, I made a small phrasebook with pictures for common needs, transportation symbols, food items I liked, numbers for negotiating prices. I rarely needed to use it because pointing usually worked, but having it gave me confidence. Now I just save key images on my phone.
That's such a great tip for our listeners. Even saving pictures of your hotel, common dishes you might want to order, or places you want to visit can help you communicate more effectively.
And don't forget about universal symbols. Bathroom signs, currency symbols, numbers, these are visual communication rules that already exist in the world around us. Learning to spot and use these universal symbols makes navigating foreign countries so much easier.
So Leah, we've covered a lot of ground in this first episode. We've talked about how communication goes beyond words, essential phrases to learn, technology tools, overcoming language anxiety, using body language, and visual communication strategies.
It's been amazing, and I hope our listeners are feeling more confident about traveling to places where they don't speak the language. Remember, perfect fluency isn't the goal, connection is. And that can happen with just a few words, a smile, and a willingness to try.
Exactly. And as one of our sources pointed out, learning even basic phrases isn't just practical, it's also part of cultural immersion. Being able to communicate in the native language, even at a basic level, enhances your travel experience tremendously.
Absolutely. Learning a new language while traveling is an enriching experience indeed. It breaks down barriers and opens up a whole new understanding of the places we visit. It's not just about getting by, it's about connecting more deeply with the culture and people.
And for those who might be feeling overwhelmed, remember that story about the traveler in Japan? They started with tiny interactions at a corner shop, buying chocolate star-shaped biscuits and making simple comments about the rain. Those small steps led to meaningful connections.
That's the perfect example. Every linguistic journey starts with a single word, and I guarantee that once you start making those connections, you'll be hooked. There's nothing quite like the feeling of successfully communicating across language barriers. It's absolutely exhilarating.
Before we wrap up, what would be your number one piece of advice for someone traveling to a country where they don't speak the language?
That's easy. Just go for it. Don't let language fears hold you back from amazing experiences. Learn a few key phrases, bring your sense of humor, and remember that most people around the world are kind and patient with travelers making an effort. Your attempts to speak their language, however imperfect, show respect and create instant goodwill.
That's perfect advice. And with that, we'll wrap up our first episode of Travel Insights. breaking barriers, building connections. Next time, we'll be discussing cultural fluency, understanding local communication styles, where we'll explore how communication styles vary across cultures and how understanding these differences can transform your travel experiences.
I can't wait. We'll be diving into fascinating topics like direct versus indirect communication, the meaning of silence in different cultures, personal space norms, and so much more. It's going to be fantastic.
Until then, keep practicing those essential phrases, download a translation app, and remember, communication is about connection, not perfection.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your travel-loving friends. We'd love to help as many people as possible break through language barriers and build meaningful connections around the world. Safe travels, everyone! We're excited to embark on this linguistic journey with you. Our goal is to equip you with practical English language skills that will enhance your travel experiences in English-speaking countries.
That's right, Leo. Whether you're planning your first trip abroad or you're a seasoned traveler looking to refine your language skills, this podcast series will provide you with the essential vocabulary, phrases, and cultural insights you need to navigate with confidence.
Today's episode focuses on getting started, airport and accommodation essentials. We'll cover crucial phrases for airports, immigration, transportation, and hotel check-ins, essentially everything you need from the moment you land until you're settled in your accommodation.
Let's begin with one of the most potentially stressful parts of international travel, arriving at the airport in an English-speaking country.
Airports can be overwhelming even for native English speakers. The key is knowing the essential vocabulary for different sections and services.
Absolutely. Let's start with the primary airport sections. When you arrive on an international flight, you'll typically follow signs for arrivals or international arrivals.
After deplaning, you'll proceed to immigration or passport control, followed by baggage claim, and then customs.
If you need to find your way, some useful phrases include, "Excuse me, where is the baggage claim area?" or "Could you direct me to the information desk, please?"
For airport services, you might need to locate the currency exchange, ATM, information desk, or transportation center. A simple phrase like, "Where can I exchange money?" or "Is there an ATM nearby?" will help you find what you need.
Understanding airport announcements can be challenging due to background noise and unfamiliar accents. Listen for key terms like boarding, gate, delay, or final call. If you miss an announcement about your flight, approach airline staff and ask, "Could you tell me the status of flight number, your flight?"
Once you've arrived, your next step is navigating immigration and customs. This can be intimidating, but with the right preparation, it's straightforward.
Immigration officers typically ask several standard questions. Be prepared to answer clearly, "What is the purpose of your visit?" with responses like tourism, business, or visiting family.
They'll also ask about your length of stay. Practice phrases like, "I'm staying for 2 weeks," or "I plan to be here until May 15th. Having your return ticket information readily available is helpful.
You'll likely be asked where you're staying. Prepare to say, "I'm staying at hotel name," or "I've booked an apartment in neighborhood or city." Having your accommodation details written down or accessible on your phone is advisable.
At customs, you may need to declare certain items. Common phrases include, "I have nothing to declare," or "I need to declare these items." If unsure about regulations, you can ask, "Do I need to declare this?"
If you don't understand a question, politely ask for clarification. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Or "Could you speak more slowly, please?" Immigration officers are accustomed to speaking with non-native English speakers.
After filling immigration and customs, you need transportation from the airport to your accommodation. This requires specific vocabulary and phrases.
Airports typically offer multiple transportation options: taxi, shuttle, bus, train, or subway. To inquire about these options, you can ask, "What's the best way to get to your destination?" Or "How much is a taxi to the city center?"
For public transportation, you might need to ask, "Where is the bus stop?" or "How frequently does the airport train run?" For schedules, try, "When is the next bus to downtown?" or "What time does the last train depart?"
When taking a taxi, it's important to clearly communicate your destination. Say, "I'd like to go to hotel name/address," or "Could you take me to this address, please?" Having your destination written down is always helpful.
Always confirm the approximate cost before starting your journey. How much will it cost to get to destination? Or do you use the meter? In some countries, it's important to establish if taxis accept credit cards, can I pay by credit card?
For rideshare services like Uber or Lyft, you'll need to specify your exact pickup location. Common phrases include, "I'm at Terminal 3 arrivals level," or "I'm standing near the taxi stand."
Now let's discuss hotel check-in essentials. This process requires specific vocabulary for a smooth experience.
When you arrive at your accommodation, begin with, "Hello, I have a reservation," or "Good evening, I'd like to check in, please." Be prepared to provide your name and confirmation number.
You might want to specify room preferences. Do you have a quiet room available? Or, "I'd prefer a room with a view if possible." For special requests, phrases like, "Is it possible to have a room on a higher floor?" Or, "I requested a king-sized bed in my booking."
To inquire about amenities, ask, "Does the hotel have a restaurant?" Or, "What time does the gym open?" For Wi-Fi information, "Is Wi-Fi included?" Or, "How do I connect to the internet?"
Understanding policies is important. Ask, "What time is checkout?" Or, "Is breakfast included in my rate?" For payment clarification, "When would you like to take payment?" Or, "Do you need a credit card for incidentals?"
If there's an issue with your reservation, remain calm and use phrases like, "There seems to be a problem with my booking," or "I believe I reserved a different room type." Clear communication is key to resolving discrepancies.
Even with careful planning, accommodation problems can arise. Having the right phrases to address these issues is invaluable.
If you encounter problems with your room, approach the front desk and explain clearly, "The air conditioning in my room isn't working," or "My room hasn't been cleaned."
For room change requests, polite phrasing is effective. "Would it be possible to change rooms?" Or, "I find my current room too noisy. Is there another available?"
Common hotel problems include malfunctioning key cards, noisy neighbors, plumbing issues, or Wi-Fi connectivity problems. Phrases like, "My key card doesn't work," or "The shower in my room isn't draining properly," communicate these issues effectively.
If you're dissatisfied, express your concerns respectfully. "I'm not satisfied with the condition of my room," or "The room doesn't match the description on your website." Always give the staff an opportunity to resolve the issue.
When problems are resolved, show appreciation. "Thank you for addressing this so quickly," or "I appreciate your help with this matter." Positive reinforcement often leads to continued good service.
To summarize today's episode, we've covered essential English phrases for navigating airports, handling immigration and customs, arranging transportation from the airport, checking into accommodations, and resolving potential issues with your stay.
Remember that clear communication is your most valuable tool when traveling. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification or repetition if you don't understand something. Most people appreciate your efforts to communicate in English, even if you're not perfectly fluent.
Having key phrases prepared in advance can significantly reduce travel stress. We recommend practicing these phrases before your trip, perhaps by role-playing common scenarios with a friend or language partner.
In our next episode, Finding Your Way, Directions and Transportation, we'll explore essential vocabulary and phrases for navigating in English-speaking countries. We'll cover asking for and understanding directions using public transportation, handling taxis and ride-sharing services, and addressing common transportation challenges.
We'll also introduce specialized vocabulary for car rentals and explain key road signs and rules you might encounter while driving abroad. Absolutely. And today we're diving right in with planning pitfalls, avoiding logistical nightmares. Because let's face it, so many travel disasters happen before you even leave home.
I think this topic really speaks to a broader trend we're seeing in this age of Instagram perfect travel photos and curated experiences. People are often shocked when their actual trips don't go as smoothly as those picture perfect posts suggest.
That's such a good point. And as someone who once showed up at the wrong airport for a flight to Barcelona, don't ask, I've experienced firsthand how easily these planning pitfalls can happen to anyone.
Wait, the wrong airport? Leo, you have to tell that story sometime. But yes, over the next 5 episodes, we'll be covering everything from cultural misunderstandings to legal requirements, travel psychology, and ethical tourism practices.
Today, though, we're focusing on those logistical nightmares that can derail your trip before it even begins. We'll talk about booking blunders, document disasters, timing troubles, budget breakdowns, and technology traps.
Because as smarttravel.com puts it, the best way to have a smooth trip, avoid common travel mistakes. Simple as that sounds, it's surprisingly easy to overlook the basics.
All right, let's jump into our first segment, booking blunders. This is probably the most common category of travel planning mistakes and one that can have serious consequences.
Oh, absolutely. I'm seeing a real shift in how people approach booking too. There's this growing tension between wanting the absolute best deal and needing flexibility, especially after all those pandemic-era cancellations that left people stranded.
That's so true. And speaking of deals, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is focusing solely on the cheapest flight without paying attention to important details like departure and arrival times.
I made that mistake last summer. Booked a red eye to save $75 and ended up spending my first day in Portugal in a zombie-like state. Not worth it.
Been there. Another common booking mistake is overlooking layover times. I've seen people book flights with 45-minute connections at massive airports like Chicago O'Hare, which is practically impossible to make if there's even a slight delay.
And what about those connections that involve changing airports? I have a friend who booked a flight to New York with a connection that required her to travel from LaGuardia to JFK in under 2 hours. Needless to say, she missed that connection.
That's brutal. On the accommodation front, a major mistake travelers make is not thoroughly reading hotel or Airbnb reviews. It's not just about the star rating, it's about understanding what previous guests actually experienced.
I'm curious, Leo, do you have a specific strategy for reading reviews? Because there's definitely an art to cutting through the noise.
I actually do. I always look for reviews that mention specific details rather than general impressions, and I pay special attention to reviews from travelers similar to me. Solo travelers, for instance, might have different priorities than families.
That's smart. And location constraints are another big one people overlook. That super cheap hotel might be cheap because it's an hour from anything you want to see, which means you'll end up spending more on transportation anyway.
Absolutely. And according to travel experts, one of the most critical steps that people skip is the simple act of double-checking all reservations and confirmation emails. I make it a habit to print everything out or save PDFs in an easily accessible folder on my phone.
You know what fascinates me? How this really reflects our broader relationship with technology. We've become so trusting of digital systems that many people don't feel the need to verify details anymore, but those systems aren't perfect.
That's a really insightful observation, and it leads perfectly into another crucial tip. If you're traveling with others, make sure at least one other person in your group has copies of all the booking information. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, or rather one phone.
So now that we've covered booking blunders, let's talk about document disasters, which honestly might be even more anxiety-inducing.
Oh man, this is the stuff of travel nightmares. The most common document mistake has to be not checking passport expiration dates. Many countries require that your passport be valid for at least 6 months beyond your planned return date.
That 6-month rule catches so many people off guard, and it really speaks to how different countries manage their borders and immigration policies. It's fascinating how something as standardized as a passport can have such different requirements around the world.
Exactly. And visa requirements are another major area where travelers get tripped up. Just because you can visit certain countries without a visa doesn't mean that applies to every country on your itinerary.
I've noticed a real generational divide on this one, Leo. Younger travelers sometimes assume visa processes are all digital and instant now, when many countries still have quite bureaucrat, paper-based systems that can take weeks.
That's so true. And related to documents, there's a cruise-specific mistake that the Point Sky website highlights. One of the biggest mistakes cruisers make is forgetting to place all medication, documents including passports, chargers, and a change of clothes in their carry-ons.
Oh yes, because your checked luggage might not be delivered to your cabin until much later in the day, right?
Exactly. They note that packing all your belongings in checked bags puts you at risk of losing everything should your luggage go missing. This applies to regular flights too, but it's especially relevant for cruises where you hand your bags to porters at the pier.
That reminds me of when my cousin went on a Caribbean cruise and couldn't join everyone at the pool that first afternoon because she had packed her swimsuit in her checked luggage. She just sat there sweating in her travel clothes while everyone else was having fun.
Classic rookie mistake. Here's something I found helpful. Creating a comprehensive document checklist tailored to your destination. This includes everything from your passport and visas to travel insurance information, hotel confirmations, and even a basic itinerary.
And do you prefer digital or physical copies? Because this is another area where I see attitudes changing rapidly.
I'm definitely a both person. I keep digital copies in a secured folder that I can access offline, but I also bring physical copies of the most essential documents. Technology fails, phones get stolen, and in some situations, officials still prefer paper.
That's smart. I think the key takeaway here is redundancy. Have backups of your important documents in multiple formats and locations. Because when you're in a foreign country and something goes wrong, that's not the time to realize you can't access crucial information.
Next up, let's talk about timing troubles, which might be less catastrophic than document disasters, but can still significantly impact your travel experience.
This is something I find particularly interesting because timing issues reflect so much about our modern relationship with time and efficiency. We're all so scheduled in our daily lives that we sometimes apply those same rigid expectations to travel, which is problematic.
That's such a good observation. And one of the biggest timing pitfalls is traveling during peak tourist seasons without realizing it. This doesn't just mean summer in Europe or spring break in Florida. Many destinations have their own unique high seasons that might not be obvious to outsiders.
Like cherry blossom season in Japan or carnival in Brazil. And what makes this tricky is that social media has really amplified these must-sees seasonal events, creating even more concentrated demand for already popular times.
Exactly. And related to that, another common mistake is not researching local holidays or events that might affect your travel experience. I once planned a trip to Italy without realizing it was Ferragosto, when many businesses and restaurants close for summer holidays.
Oh no, how did that work out?
Let's just say I got very familiar with the local grocery store's prepackaged sandwich selection. Not exactly the culinary tour of Italy I had imagined.
That reminds me of a broader pattern I've noticed. Travelers often approach destinations with a sort of extractive mindset, expecting everything to be available on their schedule rather than respecting local rhythms and rest periods.
That's a really insightful way to look at it. And speaking of schedules, another common timing mistake is not building realistic buffer time into your itinerary. This is something I see with Disney World trips too, according to Lears.net, which warns that Disney World can be an exhausting vacation and advises giving yourself some breaks and downtime during the day.
That's so true for any destination, but especially theme parks or cities with lots of attractions. There's this pressure to maximize every minute because you've spent so much money to be there. But that approach often backfires.
Absolutely. Another timing tip they mention is that if you want to get on all the best rides without paying for Genie Plus and PaperVod, you need to be at the theme parks right at opening time. That kind of insider knowledge about timing can save you both money and frustration.
And that applies beyond Disney. There are optimal times to visit most major attractions. The Louvre on a Wednesday evening versus a Saturday morning is a completely different experience.
Exactly. The bottom line with timing is to do your research and be realistic. Don't try to cram too much into too little time, and always leave room for the unexpected because in travel, the unexpected is practically guaranteed.
All right, let's move on to budget breakdowns because we can't talk about travel planning without addressing the financial side.
This is a big one. According to NPR's Life Kit, people get a lot wrong when it comes to paying for vacation, say travel experts, and that can cost serious cash. One of the biggest budget mistakes is not accounting for hidden costs.
That's fascinating because it connects to a broader economic trend we're seeing with what some call drip pricing, where the advertised price is just the starting point and various add-ons significantly increase the final cost. We see this with airlines, hotels, even concert tickets now.
That's so true. Resort fees at hotels, baggage fees for flights, seat selection charges, these can add hundreds to a trip budget if you're not prepared for them. Even seemingly small costs like airport transfers or tipping expectations can throw off a carefully planned budget.
Not to mention the psychological impact of constantly paying these unexpected costs. It creates what researchers call financial decision fatigue that can really undermine the relaxation we're seeking from vacation in the first place.
Exactly. Another common budget mistake is currency exchange missteps. I've seen people wait until they're at the airport to exchange money, where the rates are notoriously terrible.
Oh, I made that mistake in college. Changed money at Heathrow and basically donated about 15% of my budget to the exchange counter. Never again.
We've all been there. The better approach is to use bank ATMs at your destination or get a credit card with no foreign transaction fees. Speaking of credit cards, not alerting your bank about your travel plans is another common mistake that can leave you financially stranded.
There's nothing worse than having your card declined at a restaurant in a foreign country because your bank flagged it as suspicious activity. Talk about embarrassing.
I've been there too. And finally, NPR's Life Kit emphasizes the importance of creating a comprehensive travel budget that accounts for emergencies. They suggest that you can see the world and save money. It just takes a little savvy planning.
Which really speaks to the democratization of travel, right? There was a time when international travel was only for the wealthy, but with proper planning, it's become accessible to many more people. That's a positive cultural shift, even if it does require more financial literacy.
That's a great point. And part of that financial literacy is creating a budget with categories beyond just flights and hotels. Things like local transportation, meals, activities, shopping, and that all-important contingency fund for when things don't go as planned. Finally, let's talk about technology traps, the modern addition to the classic travel planning pitfalls.
This is such a rich area to explore because it reflects our growing dependence on devices while traveling. There's this interesting tension between technology making travel easier in many ways, but also creating new vulnerabilities.
Exactly. One of the most common tech-related travel issues is dealing with incompatible power adapters. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people in airport shops paying exorbitant prices for adapters they could have purchased much cheaper before their trip.
And different countries have different plug configurations. It's not just a matter of having one universal adapter. I learned that the hard way in South Africa when my supposedly universal adapter didn't fit their unique three-pronged outlets.
That's a good point. Another major tech issue is not understanding phone roaming charges, which can lead to shocking bills when you return home. According to travel experts, it's essential to either get an international plan from your provider, use a local SIM card, or rely on Wi-Fi and offline maps.
You know what's interesting about this? It shows how technology has created new expectations around constant connectivity. 20 years ago, travelers weren't expected to be instantly reachable or posting updates from their trips, but now there's almost social pressure to stay connected.
That's such a good observation. And speaking of staying connected, another tech trap is not downloading essential apps before your trip. Many museums, transit systems, and restaurants now rely heavily on apps for ticketing, ordering, and information.
And trying to download these apps on spotty public Wi-Fi or while using precious data roaming is no fun. Which apps do you consider essential for travel, Leo?
Great question. I always recommend having a translation app that works offline, a currency converter, maps that you can download for offline use, your airlines app, and possibly a VPN if you're concerned about security when using public Wi-Fi.
Those are all great suggestions, and they highlight how technology has fundamentally changed the travel experience for better and worse.
Absolutely. And finally, it's crucial to have backup strategies for when technology fails during your journey, because it will at some point. This might mean printing out key reservation details, having physical maps as backup, or simply knowing how to navigate without constant access to your phone.
I've actually started intentionally planning certain days of my trips as low-tech days, where I put my phone away and navigate more intuitively. It's amazing how different the experience can be when you're not constantly checking directions or looking for the next photo opportunity.
That's a wonderful practice. Technology should enhance our travel experiences, not dictate them. And having the flexibility to adapt when tech fails is part of being a resilient traveler.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from booking blunders to document disasters, timing troubles, budget breakdowns, and technology traps. Any final thoughts to wrap up our first episode, Leo?
I think the overarching theme here is that thoughtful preparation really does make a difference. As the Point Sky website puts it, a thoughtful approach will lead to far fewer packing mistakes than hurriedly tossing your belongings in a suitcase at midnight when your cruise sets sail the next day.
And that applies to all aspects of travel planning, not just packing. What strikes me is how these planning pitfalls reflect broader societal trends, our relationship with technology, our expectations about convenience, how we manage time and money. Travel planning is really a microcosm of modern life in many ways.
That's a profound observation. And I'd add that good planning actually enhances spontaneity rather than limiting it. When you've got the logistics handled, you have more freedom to embrace unexpected opportunities that arise during your trip.
Exactly, like that time we ran into that street festival in Lisbon because our dinner reservation fell through. Still one of my favorite travel memories.
That seafood was incredible, and we would have missed it if we'd been too rigid about sticking to our original plan.
So the takeaway isn't plan every minute, but rather plan the essentials thoroughly so you can be flexible about the rest.
Perfectly said. And with that, we're wrapping up our first episode of Travel Insights, Navigating the Common Pitfalls. Next time, we'll be diving into Cultural Compass, Navigating Social Norms Abroad, where we'll explore cultural misunderstandings and faux pas that travelers often encounter.
We'll talk about everything from language barriers to dress code dilemmas, dining etiquette, religious sensitivities, and building authentic connections across cultures. It's going to be a fascinating discussion about how to respect local customs while having meaningful cross-cultural experiences.
I can't wait. And listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your travel-loving friends. We'd love to help more people avoid these common planning pitfalls and have smoother, more enjoyable journeys.
Until next time, happy and well-planned travels.
Less enthusiastic and Claire, as you can probably tell, but equally committed to bringing you fascinating conversations about cultural differences across English-speaking countries.
Oh, come on, Leo. This is going to be amazing. We're exploring how language, customs, and societal norms vary across the global community. I've been looking forward to this for months.
It is pretty interesting stuff. Today we're kicking things off with the many Englishes, dialects, and linguistic variations. We'll be examining how the English language has evolved differently across various countries.
Exactly. We'll dive into accents, vocabulary differences, and those unique expressions that really showcase cultural identity. It's like linguistic treasure hunting.
And over the next few episodes, we'll explore food customs, work cultures, social interactions, deeper cultural values, and where it's all heading in the future.
I just love how language connects and divides us at the same time. It's so fascinating. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. So let's talk about the evolution of English. How did we end up with so many different versions of what's technically the same language?
It's such an incredible journey. English started spreading through colonization, and then these isolated communities around the world began developing their own unique variations.
Right. According to the Purdue University Writing Lab, the term World Englishes refers to these differences that emerge as the language is used in various contexts around the world.
I love how they put it. Languages develop to fulfill the needs of the societies that use them. That's why we have all these wonderful variations like American English, British English, Australian English, and so many more.
I think people forget that Old English or Anglo-Saxon would be practically unintelligible to us today. English has gone through three major periods: Old English, Middle English, and now Modern English.
And the journey continues. English today is this beautiful global language with local flavors everywhere. I actually spent a semester in Scotland during college, and I remember being completely confused the first time someone told me they were chuffed about something.
Let me guess, you thought they were annoyed.
Exactly. But they were actually really pleased. It was such a delightful discovery when I figured it out. Every misunderstanding became an opportunity to learn something new.
That's one way to look at it. Language Baj Khosrow developed a really influential model for understanding these variations. He described 3 concentric circles of English usage worldwide.
Oh, I love this concept. The inner circle includes countries where English is the primary language, like the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Then there's the outer circle and the expanding circle, representing different relationships with English.
It's a useful framework, though like any model, it has its limitations. But it helps explain why English has taken such diverse forms around the world.
Now let's talk about one of my favorite topics, British versus American English. It's so much more than just spelling differences.
True. According to Wikipedia, British English encompasses a diverse range of accents and dialects native to the United Kingdom, particularly Great Britain.
And what's amazing is that within the UK alone, there's such incredible variety. I remember watching a documentary where people from different parts of Britain could pinpoint where others were from just by hearing them speak, sometimes down to the specific city.
Historically, these differences could be a major impediment to understanding between people from different areas, though that's changed somewhat with modern communications and mass media.
But the differences between American and British English still create those delightful little moments of confusion, like when I visited London and asked for the bathroom at a restaurant and got this slightly puzzled look before being directed to a room that literally just had a bath in it.
Should have asked for the toilet or the loo.
I know that now, and I love these little vocabulary differences, like how a liquor store in America is called an off-license in Britain. According to Purdue University, that term actually comes from British law, distinguishing between businesses licensed to sell alcohol for consumption off-premises versus on-premises.
There are pronunciation differences too. Most versions of British English have non-rhotic pronunciation, meaning /r/ is not pronounced in syllable coda position.
And we can't forget spelling. The classic examples are words like color versus color and center versus center.
What's interesting is how media has influenced cross-pollination between variants. I've noticed younger British people using American slang they've picked up from TV shows and social media.
Yes, language is always evolving and borrowing. Isn't that wonderful? It's like this living, breathing entity that keeps growing and changing.
Let's move on to Australian and New Zealand English, which have their own distinctive characteristics.
Oh, I absolutely adore Australian slang. It's so creative and colorful. All those wonderful shortenings like Arvo for afternoon and Barbie for barbecue.
And don't forget Servo for service station. Australian English definitely developed its own path, partly due to its geographical isolation from other English-speaking countries.
What's fascinating is how both Australian and New Zealand English have been influenced by indigenous languages. These beautiful words and concepts that have been incorporated into everyday speech.
Though that influence varies depending on region and historical contact, New Zealand English, or Kiwi English, has more Maori influence than Australian English has Aboriginal language influence, generally speaking.
My cousin moved to Sydney 5 years ago, and now she says no worries after practically everything. I think it's wonderful how quickly people can adapt to local speech patterns. She even has a bit of an accent now.
That's actually a good example of linguistic accommodation, when people unconsciously modify their speech to match those around them.
See? Even when we're not trying, language brings us together. I think that's beautiful.
Or it could just be that humans are social creatures wired to fit in with their peer groups.
Always the optimist, Leo. But you can't deny that the creativity in Australian and New Zealand English is impressive. All that linguistic innovation happening in relative isolation.
Now let's talk about African and Caribbean English variants, which have their own fascinating development patterns.
This is such a rich area of linguistic diversity. The English spoken in countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, and Trinidad has been shaped by so many different influences.
Creole languages are particularly interesting here. They developed when English mixed with local languages during the colonial period, often in plantation settings where people from different linguistic backgrounds needed to communicate.
And what emerged were these beautiful, vibrant new languages with their own grammar and vocabulary. I had a Jamaican roommate in college, and listening to her talk with her family was like music. The rhythm and flow were completely different from what I was used to.
Code switching is common in these contexts too. That's when speakers move between different languages or varieties of language depending on the social context.
Yes, my roommate would speak differently with her professors than with her family. It wasn't that one was more correct than the other. They were just appropriate for different settings. I always thought that was such a special skill.
According to research from sociolinguists, this is similar to what happens with African American vernacular English, sometimes called Ebonics, and Standard American English. They're mutually intelligible but follow different rules of pronunciation, sentence structure, and vocabulary.
And colonial history played such a significant role in shaping these English variants. Each region developed its own distinct characteristics based on local languages and cultures.
Right, and sometimes these variants became tied to identity and even resistance to colonial powers. Language can be political.
That's so true. Language is often about much more than just communication. It's about who we are and where we belong. I think that's what makes this topic so fascinating.
Moving to another region, let's discuss Indian English and other South Asian variations.
Indian English is absolutely fascinating. It has these distinctive grammatical structures and such a rhythmic quality to it.
Braj Khatru, who we mentioned earlier with his Three Circles Māori, actually published his first journal article on the Indianness in Indian English. He argued that Indian English is a unique variety, neither American nor British English.
That makes perfect sense. Languages adapt to the needs of their speakers. In India, English has integrated with local languages to create something wonderfully unique.
You see this in vocabulary with words like propone, the opposite of postpone, which isn't commonly used in other varieties of English but makes perfect logical sense.
I love that example. Why shouldn't we have a word for moving something earlier? It's so practical. And there are beautiful expressions too, like doing the needful, which I started using after working with Indian colleagues because it's such a useful phrase.
South Asian English also plays an interesting role in post-colonial identity. English was originally imposed during British colonial rule, but it's been reclaimed and transformed.
Yes. Now it's become this vibrant part of South Asian culture and identity. I think it's a wonderful example of taking something that was imposed and making it your own.
Though it's worth noting that English proficiency in South Asia is still often associated with education and class privilege, so it's complicated.
That's true of many places where English isn't the first language, but is valued for economic and educational reasons. But I still think the creativity and adaptation show the resilience of these communities. They've created something beautiful and functional.
For our final segment, let's look at how English language evolution is accelerating in the digital age.
Oh, this is where everything gets super exciting. Technology is changing English usage globally at a pace we've never seen before.
Internet slang and acronyms spread almost instantly across English-speaking regions now. Terms that might have taken years to travel between countries can now go viral in hours.
And it's creating this wonderful global youth language. My teenage niece uses the exact same slang as teenagers in Australia, the UK, and other English-speaking countries. They're all watching the same TikToks and following the same influencers.
So regional differences do persist, and sometimes digital communication actually reinforces local identity, like when people deliberately use regional slang or dialect features in their posts to show where they're from.
That's such a good point. It's not all homogenization. The internet lets people celebrate their linguistic uniqueness too. I follow this Scottish Twitter account that highlights distinctly Scottish expressions, and it's absolutely delightful.
Looking ahead, there are different predictions for whether English variants will continue to diverge or start to converge. Some linguists think we'll see more standardization due to global media,
while others believe we'll see more hybridization, new English variants that mix features from different regional varieties. Personally, I'm excited about all the possibilities. Language evolution is this beautiful, organic process.
English has certainly shown itself to be adaptive throughout history, from Old English to whatever comes next.
Exactly, and I think that's why it's become such a successful global language. It's not rigid, it bends and grows and changes to meet the needs of its speakers. That flexibility is its strength.
Well, that brings us to the end of our first episode of Global Insights.
And what a wonderful journey it's been. We've explored how English has evolved differently across various countries, from the historical spread through colonization to today's digital innovations.
We looked at British versus American English differences, Australian and New Zealand linguistic innovations, African and Caribbean variants, South Asian English, and how technology is changing language use.
I think what really stands out to me is how creative people are with language. Every community adapts English to suit their needs and express their identity. It's not about right or wrong, it's about communication and belonging.
And understanding these variations can help us navigate cross-cultural communication more effectively.
Absolutely. It's all part of this beautiful tapestry of global communication. I'm just so excited about this entire series.
Speaking of which, next time we'll be talking about At the Table, food customs and eating habits, examining how dining etiquette and food preferences vary across English-speaking nations.
Oh, I can't wait. Food traditions reflect such deep cultural values and historical influences. And I promise I won't talk about that disastrous attempt I made at cooking a traditional English breakfast for my British friends. Or maybe I will.
I'm sure you'll find a way to work it in. Thanks for listening to our first episode of Global Insights. We'll be back next week with more cultural exploration.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with friends and family, and join us next time as we dig into delicious discussions about food cultures around the English-speaking world.
Before we dive into today's topic, let's give our listeners a quick overview of what they can expect from Currency Conversations. This podcast series will explore various currencies and their value fluctuations in the global foreign exchange market.
That's right. We'll be discussing everything from currency pairs and exchange rates to trading mechanisms and how global events impact currencies. There's so much to cover, and I just know our listeners are going to love learning about it all.
Today's episode is titled Fundamentals of Foreign Exchange: Understanding Currency Markets. We'll be laying the groundwork for future episodes by explaining what the Forex market is, how it works, and why it matters.
I can't wait to get started. The foreign exchange market is just fascinating. It's literally the largest financial market in the world. There's so much opportunity there for people who understand how it works.
So let's start at the basics. What exactly is the foreign exchange market, or Forex?
The Forex market is this amazing global marketplace where currencies are bought and sold. It's where exchange rates between different currencies are determined. And get this, according to the Bank for International Settlements, trading in foreign exchange markets averaged a staggering $7.5 trillion per day in April 2022.
That's an astronomical figure. To put that in perspective, that's more than the GDP of many countries combined. What makes this market unique compared to others like the stock market?
Oh, there are so many wonderful things that make the Forex market special. For one, it's completely decentralized. There's no central exchange like with stocks. It operates over the counter, which means trading happens directly between parties through a global network of banks, brokers, and financial institutions.
And it's essentially a 24-hour market, right? Unlike the stock market, which is defined opening and closing times.
Exactly. It runs 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, following the sun around the globe. Trading starts when markets open in Australia on Monday morning and continues until markets close in New York on Friday evening. Isn't that incredible? It gives traders so much flexibility.
Let's talk about the main participants in the Forex market. Who are the key players here?
The biggest participants are definitely the major international banks. They act as market makers and provide liquidity to the market. Then you have central banks, which can intervene to stabilize their currencies. And there are also institutional investors, multinational corporations, and retail traders like you and me.
I've always found it interesting that while retail traders like individual investors are part of the market, they make up a relatively small portion of the total trading volume.
True, but that small percentage still represents thousands of individual traders pursuing their financial dreams. And with online trading platforms becoming more accessible, more people than ever can participate in this exciting market. I actually have a cousin who started Forex trading last year, and she's having the time of her life learning about different currencies.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Forex trading to everyone. It can be extremely risky, especially with the leverage that many brokers offer. But we'll get to that later in the episode.
Of course, there are risks, but there are risks in everything worth doing. With proper education and risk management, it can be such a rewarding experience. But you're right, we should definitely talk about the risks too.
Now let's discuss how currencies are actually traded. Clara, can you explain the concept of currency pairs to our listeners?
I'd love to. Currencies are always traded in pairs, which is such a clever system. For example, when you see EUR/USD, that's the euro against the US dollar. The first currency listed is called the base currency, and the second is the quote currency.
And what that means is that the exchange rate shows how much of the quote currency is needed to purchase one unit of the base currency. So if EUR/USD is 1.10, it means 1 euro equals 1.10 US dollars.
Exactly. And when you're trading, you're essentially taking a position on how you think the value of one currency will change relative to another. If you think the euro will strengthen against the dollar, you would buy EUR/USD. If you think it will weaken, you would sell.
It's worth noting that there are different categories of currency pairs too. You have the majors, which involve the US dollar paired with other major currencies like the euro, Japanese yen, British pound, and so on.
And don't forget the minors and exotics. Minor pairs don't include the US dollar, but still involve major currencies like EUR/GBP. And exotic pairs include currencies from emerging or smaller economies paired with a major currency. There's something for everyone, depending on what part of the world you're interested in.
Let's talk about a fundamental concept in Forex trading, the bid and ask price. This is something that confuses a lot of newcomers.
It's actually quite simple once you break it down. The bid price is what buyers are willing to pay for a currency pair, and the ask price is what sellers are willing to accept. The difference between these prices is called the spread, and that's essentially how brokers make money.
Right. And typically, the more liquid the currency pair, the smaller the spread. That's why major pairs like EUR/USD usually have tighter spreads than exotic pairs.
Absolutely. It's all about liquidity. The more buyers and sellers there are for a currency pair, the easier it is to enter and exit positions at fair prices. I love trading the major pairs because the spreads are so competitive. It makes the whole experience much more enjoyable.
You seem to have some experience with Forex trading, Clara. Have you been active in the markets?
I dabble. Nothing serious, but I opened a small account last year to put my knowledge into practice. It's one thing to understand the theory, but actually seeing how currency pairs move in real time is a whole different experience. I mostly stick to EUR/USD and GBP/USD though, keeping it simple.
Now let's discuss something that makes Forex trading both attractive and dangerous leverage. Claire, can you explain what leverage is and how it works in Forex?
Of course. Leverage is like a magnifying glass for your trading capital. It allows you to control a much larger position than what your account balance would normally permit. For example, with 100-to-1 leverage, you could control a $100,000 position with just $1,000 of your own money.
And that's where the danger comes in. While leverage can amplify your profits, it equally amplifies your losses. A small move against your position can wipe out your entire account if you're not careful.
That's true, but that's why proper risk management is so important. I always look at leverage as an opportunity rather than a threat. With the right stop-loss orders and position sizing, it can be managed effectively. It's all about being responsible and not getting carried away with the excitement of potentially big profits.
I have to say, Clara, you're much more optimistic about leverage than I am. I've seen too many traders, especially beginners, blow up their accounts because they didn't fully understand the risks.
Well, I believe in focusing on the positive possibilities while still acknowledging the risks. That's just my approach to trading and life in general. But you make a good point. Education is crucial before using leverage. No one should jump in without understanding exactly what they're doing.
Let's talk about why the foreign exchange market exists in the first place. It's not just for traders to speculate on currency movements.
Absolutely not. The primary purpose of the Forex market is to assist international trade and investments by enabling currency conversion. It's what allows businesses to operate globally.
Exactly. For instance, if a US company wants to import goods from Europe, they need to pay in euros, not dollars. The Forex market facilitates this transaction.
And it's not just for big corporations either. Think about when you go on vacation to another country, you need to exchange your dollars for the local currency. That's the Forex market at work too. I remember last summer when I went to Italy, I was so excited watching the EUR/USD rate in the weeks before my trip, hoping for a stronger dollar to make my gelato more affordable.
That's a good point. The Forex market touches everyone's lives in some way, whether directly or indirectly. It's also important for central banks managing their foreign reserves and implementing monetary policy.
Exactly. And don't forget about investors who use Forex for diversification or to hedge against currency risk in their portfolios. There are so many practical applications beyond just speculative trading.
Let's dive into a bit of history. The modern foreign exchange market as we know it today didn't always exist. It began forming in the 1970s following the collapse of the Bretton Woods system.
Oh, the Bretton Woods system is fascinating. It was an agreement established after World War II where countries maintained fixed exchange rates against the US dollar, and the dollar was convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. It created such stability in the post-war era.
Yes, but it eventually became unsustainable. By 1971, President Richard Nixon announced that the US would no longer redeem dollars for gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system.
And that's when we moved to our current system of floating exchange rates, where currency values are determined primarily by market forces of supply and demand. While it might seem less stable on the surface, it actually allows economies to adjust more naturally to changing conditions. Every system has its pros and cons.
Prior to Bretton Woods, most countries were on the gold standard, where currencies were backed by a specific amount of gold. This system had its own set of advantages and challenges.
It's amazing to see how currency systems have evolved over time, from gold coins to paper money backed by gold to our current system where currencies derive value from economic strength and market confidence. I find the whole evolution so inspiring. Humans are incredibly adaptable.
Now let's talk about what actually moves currency values in the Forex market. There are numerous factors that influence exchange rates.
There are so many exciting factors. Interest rates are a big one. When a country's central bank raises interest rates, it often strengthens the currency because higher rates attract foreign capital. Economic indicators like GDP growth, employment data, and inflation also have significant impacts.
Political stability and geopolitical events can cause major currency fluctuations too. For example, elections, policy changes, or conflicts can lead to volatility in the affected country's currencies.
And don't forget market sentiment. Sometimes currencies move based on traders' perceptions and emotions rather than fundamental factors. I love observing how market psychology plays out in currency movements. It's like watching a fascinating social experiment unfold in real time.
Trade balances also play a role. Countries with a trade surplus, meaning they export more than they import, tend to have stronger currencies over time, all else being equal.
It's like a complex puzzle where all these pieces interact with each other. That's what makes Forex so dynamic and exciting. There's always something new to learn and discover about how these various factors influence currency values.
Let's discuss some of the mechanics of Forex trading. We mentioned currency pairs earlier, but there are also different types of Forex transactions.
Yes. The most common type is spot trading, where currencies are bought and sold for immediate delivery, usually within 2 business days. It's what most retail traders engage in, and it's wonderful for capturing short-term price movements.
Then you have forwards and futures, which are contracts to buy or sell currencies at a specified price on a future date. These are often used by businesses to hedge against currency risk.
And don't forget about options, which give the holder the right but not the obligation to exchange currencies at a predetermined rate before a specific date. They're a fantastic tool for managing risk while still maintaining potential upside.
Swaps are another type of transaction where two parties exchange currencies and agree to reverse the exchange at a later date. These are primarily used by financial institutions.
It's amazing how many different tools are available in the Forex market. There's truly something for everyone, whether you're a day trader looking for quick profits, a long-term investor, or a business trying to manage currency exposure. The versatility is what makes it such an accessible and exciting market.
Now, let's talk about some common order types used in Forex trading. Understanding these is crucial for effectively executing your trading strategy.
Absolutely. The most basic is a market order, which executes immediately at the best available price. It's perfect when you want to enter or exit a position right away. I use these all the time when I see a great opportunity that I don't want to miss.
Then there are limit orders, which allow you to specify the price at which you want to buy or sell. The order will only execute if the market reaches your specified price.
Stop orders are another fantastic tool. They become market orders once a specified price level is reached. They're incredibly useful for limiting losses or protecting profits. I never trade without setting stop losses. It's like having a safety net.
There are also more sophisticated order types like trailing stops, which automatically adjusts as the price moves in your favor, helping to lock in profits while still giving the trade room to breathe.
One of my favorites is the OCO order, one cancels the other. It lets you place both a limit order and a stop order, and when one executes, the other automatically cancels. It's such a clever way to manage your trades efficiently.
Let's touch on a few common trading strategies in the Forex market. There are various approaches traders use to try to profit from currency movements.
There are so many exciting strategies. Technical analysis is hugely popular. That's where you study price charts and use indicators to identify potential entry and exit points. I love using moving averages and RSI in my own trading. They provide such clear signals.
On the other hand, fundamental analysis involves evaluating economic indicators, central bank policies, and geopolitical events to forecast currency movements. Traders who use this approach often focus on news releases and economic calendars.
Position trading is when you hold trades for weeks, months, or even years based on long-term trends. It's perfect for people with patience who don't want to be glued to their screens all day. Though I personally find day trading more exciting, the fast pace keeps me engaged.
Carry trading is another strategy where traders attempt to profit from interest rate differentials between two currencies. You buy a currency with a high interest rate and sell one with a low rate, earning the difference.
And scalping is for the real adrenaline junkies, making multiple trades within minutes or even seconds to capture tiny price movements. I tried it once, and it was like riding a roller coaster. Not for everyone, but definitely thrilling if you have the temperament for it.
I think it's important that we talk about the risks involved in Forex trading. While there are opportunities for profit, it's not without significant dangers.
You're absolutely right, Leo. While I'm naturally optimistic about the opportunities in Forex, it's crucial to understand the risks too. The good news is that with proper education and risk management, many of these risks can be mitigated. It's all about being prepared.
Leverage, as we discussed earlier, is a double-edged sword. It can magnify profits, but also lead to substantial losses that exceed your initial investment. This is why many regulators around the world have placed limits on the amount of leverage available to retail traders.
Market volatility is another factor to consider. Currency pairs can experience rapid price changes, especially during major news releases or unexpected events. But I always see volatility as opportunity in disguise. It's all about having the right strategy for the market conditions.
There's also counterparty risk, particularly if you're trading with an unregulated broker. It's essential to choose a reputable broker regulated by a recognized financial authority.
And don't forget about emotional risks. Trading psychology plays such an important role. Fear and greed can lead to poor decision-making if you're not mindful of your emotions. I always try to stick to my trading plan and not let my feelings get in the way of making rational decisions. Staying positive but realistic is key.
Before we wrap up today's episode, let's briefly talk about the major currency pairs that dominate the Forex market. These are the most widely traded pairs and typically have the highest liquidity.
The EUR/USD euro against the US dollar is the absolute star of the show. It's the most traded pair globally, representing two of the world's largest economies. It's my personal favorite to trade because of its excellent liquidity and reasonable volatility.
Then you have USD/JPY, the US dollar against the Japanese yen. This pair is often influenced by the interest rate differential between the Federal Reserve and the Bank of Japan.
GBP/USD, or cable as traders affectionately call it, represents the British pound against the US dollar. It tends to be more volatile than EUR/USD, which can create exciting trading opportunities.
Other major pairs include USD/CH, FUS dollar against the Swiss franc, AUD/USD Australian dollar against the US dollar, and USDC/AD US dollar against the Canadian dollar.
And these major pairs will actually be the focus of our next episode. We'll be diving deep into the characteristics of each major currency, their historical development, and what influences their value. I can't wait to explore these currencies in more detail. Each one has such a fascinating story.
Well, that brings us to the end of our first episode of Currency Conversations. Let's summarize what we've covered today.
We've had such an amazing start to the series. We've explored what the foreign exchange market is, the largest financial market in the world, with over $7.5 trillion traded daily. We've learned how currencies are traded in pairs and discussed the various participants in the market.
We also examined the mechanics of Forex trading, including different transaction types, order types, and common trading strategies. And importantly, we highlighted the potential risks involved.
And we touched on the historical development of the Forex market, from the gold standard to the Bretton Woods system to our current system of floating exchange rates. It's been quite a journey through the fundamentals of Forex.
In our next episode, Major Global Currencies, Profiles and Dynamics, we'll take a deep dive into the world's major currencies, examining their historical development, economic significance, and unique characteristics.
I'm so excited for that. We'll be exploring what gives currencies like the US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, and British pound their prominence and how they interact within the global financial ecosystem. It's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Thank you for joining us for this inaugural episode of Currency Conversations. We hope you found it informative and enjoyable.
We certainly had a wonderful time recording it. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends or colleagues who might be interested in learning more about the fascinating world of currencies. And don't forget to tune in for our next episode on major global currencies.
Until then, remember that while the Forex market offers opportunities, it's essential to approach it with knowledge, caution, and a solid understanding of the risks involved.
Absolutely. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay positive about your financial journey. There's so much to learn and discover in the world of currencies, and we're thrilled to be your guides. See you next time on Currency Conversations.